Hey guys, so right now we're gonna go do the ghost tour walking by Flagler College. We're gonna go walking with Sally. Stay tuned and be prepared to see some ghosts.
Oh Lord, hear me turn these words into a song for them to sing along to when I'm gone, for them to sing along to when
So let's start our tour of the ghost town in St. Augustine, Florida.
I don't know how many of you there are, so we'll just go. Come on, scoot up, scoot up, scoot up, scoot up, scoot up, scoot up, scoot up. Welcome, 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 welcome. Hi, I'm Sally. Hi, Sally. Hi, how are you? Are you guys on the 8:15? Oh. If you haven't got a sticker, you might be on the next tour. If you go to the first tour on your right, they might be able to tell you where you need to be. Anyway, I'm Sally again. Hi.
Hi.
This is the 8:15 tour. If you're on the 8:15 tour, you're in the right place. Yeah. If you haven't signed up for the 8:15 tour, you're in the wrong place. Boo. Boo. So there you go. Welcome again. I am a licensed tour guide here in the city of St. Augustine. Impressive, I know. This
Laminated
means,
and everything.
I know, licensed and everything, so it really doesn't mean that. But anyway, that means that I studied a very lengthy book, actually just a very small pamphlet, on information about the city of St. Augustine. And then I took a very difficult, about a 12-question multiple choice test on information about the city of St. Augustine, which I passed on my second try. Woo! There you go. That is because I'm from Atlanta, so I had to learn this stuff anew. So give me a break on that one. So let's see. Licensed tour guide, that's a good thing. You have chosen tonight the original ghostly walking experience. It is called that for a reason. That is because we're the first tour company in the state of Florida to walk anybody around a haunted town and tell stories of historical nature, and we do our best to stir up some spooks along the way. That's what we do. So it's the original because, like I said, we're the very first producers to do that. They chose St. Augustine because we are the third most haunted city in the United States of America. I'll be careful how I count this down. Get it? I got it. Anyway, what do you think is number one?
New Orleans, Massachusetts.
Salem's a good guess, but New Orleans is correct. They have voodoo.
Oh.
I mean, think about it. That's how much haunted or more haunted-y. Anyway, they have voodoo. Number two.
Savannah.
Yes.
I knew it.
Very good, very good. Salem is an awesome guess, and it is a very haunted city. Well, there you go. So you're in the third most haunted city in the United States of America. When we get to our first stop, we'll talk about why it's so haunted. Next, I'd like you to take from your pocket, your handbag, your hat, wherever you keep it stored, your ghost hunting devices that you brought with you tonight. Your cell phones. Yay! I had a lady a couple of weeks ago look at her daughter and said, I can't go, I forgot my ghost hunting device. Like she had one. I was like, oh. Okay. What are we looking for? We are looking for things like orbs. This is an orb over my head. At a tour back in a long time ago, maybe 2007, in a small town north of Atlanta, where I was the producer, writer on a seasonal ghost tour in that area. An orb is a glowing ball of light. That was a daytime birthday tour, so it was kind of interesting that that showed up that day. The other thing you might be looking for are ribbons of energy, full body apparitions. Who knows? However, this tonight is not a haunted house. So no one with a chainsaw is going to jump out at you. Thank God. At least it hasn't happened yet. Now, any given night, I could be wrong on that.
If he does, it's real. Run away.
That's right. We're gonna whack him with the lantern and take off as quickly as we can. a little bit of housekeeping. Let's stay together, especially in the crosswalks. As much as I'd love to tell the story of your demise on tomorrow night's tour, I don't think the rest of your group would appreciate that too much, so let's stay together. The other thing I do need to warn you, look out for the sidewalks. The pavement is very uneven here in St. Augustine. We flood if two people flush a toilet at the same time, so you gotta watch out for that. Now, as far as your phones go, snap a lot of pictures, use your flash. It doesn't bother me at all during the tours. The only thing that really annoys me during a ghost tour are holly jolly trolleys, Harley Davidson motorcycles, and trucks from Palatka. If you're a local, you get that. If you're not, one will go by, and we'll point one out as we go. So there you go. All right, let's see. We're going to stay in the crosswalk, third most haunted city, licensed tour guide. I can't remember anything else. If I do, we'll think of it later. First crosswalk. Let's go this way.
Go. You ready, Richard? Eddie, let's go. Oh my God.
This was built a year later. Oh, you're on the right, guys.
Yes, I use a lantern with a solar battery powered light. Don't judge me. I used to use a real candle with a real flame, but a flame and a long skirt didn't go well one year. And I have a wee little scar right there to prove it. So now we use batteries on the request of my husband, who said, yeah, I don't think I want you using that anymore. So before we get started, let's build a foundation in your mind for the evening. The best thing I can tell you about St. Augustine is you need to think about the fact that everywhere you see holly jolly trolleys, annoying already. And Christmas is over. Can I just throw that out there? Just saying Christmas is over. So anyway, St. Augustine, everywhere you step, you are literally stepping on layers of the deceased. Literally everywhere. I like you to think in your mind of St. Augustine as being a layer cake of dead people. They are stacked below us. Even here, all over, and I have pictures later to prove it. I can't wait. That's going to be great. A layer cake of the deceased. This is because St. Augustine has been continuously occupied by humans for like 4,000 years. This plot of Earth. So that's a long time for people to live. And of course, what do people who live do? They die. That's just the deal. And they're buried here beneath us. So 4,000 years ago, what type of human do you think lived here?
Paleo-American.
Native American Indians, the Tummaquah to be exact, not the Seminole. The Seminole came down later. The word Seminole actually means runaway. They ran away from South Carolina. A little bit of history there. We had the Tummaquah here. The Tummaquah village was full of very healthy, very strong, very tall people. We believe this is one of the reasons Ponce de Leon thought he'd found the Fountain of Youth, because the English and all of the other Europeans and the Spanish were very short people, and they really weren't super healthy. They had a lot of diseases. And they arrived in the New World, and here are these tall, healthy Indians. They were healthy because they were eating fish and food that they grew themselves. They were also a very smart people. The women were in charge. That's smart. So anyway, that was what they lived here for thousands of years. So that starts your timeline here in St. Augustine. The next thing that happened in St. Augustine is the Spanish arrived in the late 1500s. Now, something important about Spain, like I said, we're building a foundation for the stories tonight. Spain had two reasons to circumnavigate the globe. One was they were filthy rich empire, very, very wealthy empire. So they were looking around the world for ways to increase their wealth. That would be by finding gold, silver, indigo, sugarcane, spices, things to trade. So that was their intent in looking around the world and starting these new places to live. The second reason they were going around the globe, they thought the whole world should become Catholic. And if you were not a Catholic, they had a swift solution to your problem. And many, many people were beheaded simply for not being Catholic. Kind of similar to why we call a Bloody Mary. Queen Mary beheaded many, many, many Protestants, hence her nickname Bloody Mary. Just throwing that out there as well. So there you go. Pardon me?
It's a little English history.
Little English history as well. That was the time period. Your religious affiliation could either, anyway, there you go. So we had the Spanish for a very short period of time. England held this plot of land, went back to the Spanish. And then in the 1800s, it became part of the United States of America. Yay! And then in the late 1800s, Henry Flagler came here, and he brought with him my favorite era of all, tourism. Kind of handy for that weekend, right? And apparently it worked pretty good for him bringing people here. Henry Flagler was filthy rich. He rubbed shoulders with the likes of Rockefeller, Carnegie, DuPont. These were men who were very wealthy, building America, forging steel. Henry Flagler's claim to fame was building railroads, which is near and dear to my heart because during the day I work for Norfolk Southern. Yay! For railroads. I love railroads. I like trains. I cannot lie. So Henry Flagler came here and he built a railroad all the way from upstate New York to Key West. And it opened up Florida to commerce. And it was a great place because, now let's see, who told me it was snowing at home? Because in January, February, and March, up north in upstate New York, it's a little colder tonight than it is here. We're just in a light jacket. Up there, it's probably snowing, 30 degrees, maybe colder. But when you're filthy rich, why would you live like that in the winter? No reason for that at all. So they came to places like Jekyll Island, Cumberland Island in Georgia, and here in St. Augustine, Florida. And when he came here, he loved St. Augustine, but there was no hotel to stay in that matched his social standing in the world. So what do you do when you're rich? You build a hotel. And he built the Ponce de Leon Hotel, which is behind me. The two water towers in the back are actual working water towers. The Ponce de Leon Hotel, interestingly, was electrified 10 years before the White House. That's kind of cool. And guess who ran the original wiring in this building? Thomas Edison. Wow. Thomas Edison walked the halls and ran the first wiring to this building 10 years before the White House was electrified, because that's what money gets you. There you go. Yep. So all of his affluent friends would winter here. And in the first year that the building was open, he brought his first wife, Mary, with him. She stayed with him here at the hotel. She brought a dear friend named Ida Alice. And Ida Alice is the first spirit we'll try to stir up a little bit tonight. Ida Alice was a flaming redhead, a failed Broadway star. Now, it's hard to tell in the dark, but do we have any redheads here tonight? Red hair is a warning, because redheads are born a little, they're crazy. I have some in my family. My mother was yeah, that's true. The McKay side. Irish and American. There you go. So redheads are a little kooky. Ida Alice was a little bit kooky. And Ida Alice indeed was a friend to Mary, but Mary passed away. And the very next year they came here for the winter. By then, Henry Flagler had found comfort in the arms of the flaming redhead and had married her. But she maintained a suite of rooms on the second floor. Those last 3 windows underneath the illuminated balcony there. She enjoyed that suite of rooms because she liked to invite her friends over in the afternoon. That sounds nice, doesn't it? They would play board games. They would smoke opium. It was a fun time in those days in the afternoons. Her favorite of all board games was one where we would all gather together and place our hands, yeah, you know where I'm going with this one, on a small piece of wood, and we would ask questions. There's a train, coincidentally, right there. That's probably CSX. Yeah, it's the CSX. I can tell by the whistle. It's not going fast enough to be Amtrak, so there you go. And we would ask questions of the spirit board. It was called a planchette. Nowadays, you'd know it as a Ouija board. Of course you would. So she enjoyed smoking the opium. She enjoyed trying to talk to the spirit realm. But unfortunately for her red-headed crazy self, the opium just increased that. So don't do that. Lay off the opium. Stick with the wine. Okay, stick with wine. She started getting crazier and crazier. Finally, Henry Flagler realized he had a crazy wife. She would run up and down the hallway hollering crazy things. Excuse me, nothing but a nightgown and bare feet. It would disturb the other guests. He started locking her in her room because she wouldn't give up the opium. He would lock her in the room and she would break out running up and down that hallway. He realized quickly he had a lunatic for a wife. I'm trying to find, there's usually a few in the crowd. Nothing. She didn't hear any of that, did she? So what do you do if your spouse has lost their mind? Can you divorce them on those grounds? No, you cannot. That is against the law. I don't know if any of you gentlemen have Googled that, but it is against the law.
You heard Richard?
But what happens when you're filthy rich? Well, he went to Tallahassee and made donations, we'll call them, to the legislature there. And for one day in the state of Florida, it was legal to divorce your spouse simply on the grounds that she had lost her mind. Wow. He shipped her up to upstate New York, where she died, stuck in that insane asylum the rest of her days. But now, don't worry about dear Ida Alice. And occasionally the street light will flash at this point. I don't know if it'll do it tonight. Ida Alice's spirit still lingers here at what is now Flagler College. She's still seen running up and down the hallways during what we call the witching hour. Basically 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. is what I consider the witching hour. She's still seen running up and down the hallways in nothing but a nightgown and bare feet, running and yelling things about Henry Flagler. Well, who still sees her the most? Well, in the fall, classes start anew here at the college, and those 3 rooms are now part of the freshman girls' dormitory. That must be fun for the girls. We're going to walk this way. We're taking a really big trek to our next stop, but it's going to get us out of the noise, and we're going to find the darker side of town. I know where that's at. I don't like it.
Let's keep walking.
At the end, dark. But at the beginning of the summer, we were walking past, lights were dark, didn't think anything of it. I get to this spot, and the last part of the group jumps into the street. A little boy popped his head up in the window. There wasn't anybody there. Just saying. They swore they saw somebody pop their head up. So from now on, I kind of keep an eye out on anybody jumping into the street where the traffic is. So at this point in the tour, I'd like to ask, where the heck you from?
NSB. New Smyrna Beach.
Ah, gotcha. I didn't recognize that lingo.
Part of the same group.
Same group?
Miami.
Ah, nice.
Palm Bay. Miami.
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 Miami. Arizona.
Peru. Yay! Very nice. I bet you like chocolate, don't you? Have that chocolate drink. Yes. That's very interesting.
Arizona.
Oh, nice. Really, very nice. Very nice. My grandson lives in Arizona.
Jacksonville.
Sweet.
Don't worry, we're not dangerous, we promise.
Yeah, I don't know.
Despite what the news says. Cleveland.
Cleveland. Sorry about that. I asked that question for 2 reasons. One, last year, right about this same time of year, I asked that very same question, and I got the best response I've ever. Now I'm adding helicopters to mine. It's official. I come to the quiet part of town, and I get the only helicopter in the whole town over my tour. That's my luck. I asked that because last January I got the funniest response to the question of where you're from. And I asked the question and I heard Kentucky, Texas, the Taco Bell. What? The Taco Bell. It was a bunch of managers. They were out for like a team building event. And I have to tell you, I did not get a coupon. I did not get a gift card. I got nothing at the end of the tour. Nothing. I said, you say the word Taco Bell, and then I get nothing. It still bothers me today. The second reason I tell you that is when you return to Peru or Texas or hot Cleveland. Sorry, you do have to go back, don't you? Sorry about that. I'm just joking. And you say, I went to a ghost tour in St. Augustine, Florida. Someone in the know might ask you, did you hear the one about? This is the one about. It is because there are lots and lots of tour guides here in St. Augustine. And that's cool. That's very cool. Some are very young. Some are very not. So there you go. Just had a birthday, got a little bit older. Have a 0 at the end of this one. That wasn't fun at all. So we'll talk about that later. Talk about that later. But anyway, so we all bring to the tours a different level of experience. Of course we would. But I would guarantee 90% of the tour guides in St. Augustine will tell you this story. And this is the story of the dear Bishop Verreaux. Now, we talked about Spain being oh so Catholic. When the Spanish first came here, they came directly from Cuba and settled here. That's about a 3-day ship trip, a trip in a ship, 3 days. When they landed, one of the first buildings they would build would be a church. And we're actually going to weave our way to the spot of that original church. Of course, it's no longer there. That was over 450 years ago. So they built this church. They brought with them some priests, including the dear Bishop Verreaux. The dear Bishop Verreaux was very loved in Cuba, and he was very loved here in St. Augustine. He was humble, he was kind, he was much adored. But unfortunately for the dear Bishop Verreaux, he succumbed to death one very hot summer day by means of natural causes at the ripe old age of 41. A couple weeks ago, I had a lady out for her 41st birthday party, and she about fell into the street. I promised her we have penicillin now, things are better. So anyway, live a little bit longer. So the dear bishop did succumb to death, and normally we would put you in the ground very quickly. But so many people we knew were in Cuba that would want to attend the service. So we sent a ship to Cuba to get those attendees. So now he's been dead a day. We're getting him in a box. We'll tell you about the box in a minute. We send a ship to Cuba. Then they're heading back. And well, he's about out of the ground about 10 days by the time the service commences. Now, the other thing about the dear Bishop Verreaux, we built him a really special box. And where his face would be, instead of covering with wood, we installed a glass window pane so that lots and lots of people could pay their respects to the dear Bishop Verreaux. Now, do I have any funeral directors or morticians in the crowd? Grave diggers, none of that. I did have a mortician over the Christmas holidays. He gave me a free measuring tape. Those are handy. Never mind. Anyway. It'll take a while, but you'll get it. You'll get it. You'll get it. You'll get it. He would tell you that nowadays we have many ways to preserve your body after death. We have draining the fluids and filling you up with embalming fluids. That's a nice one. We have my favorite, refrigeration. That's a good way to keep a dead body preserved. But in those days we did not, so it was better to get you in the ground quickly. But like I said, we needed to wait for the other people to come from Cuba. Now, there were two things happening to the bishop's body. One, well, let's just say that the priests were lighting a lot of incense in the church where we had his body because he was getting a little stinky at this point. And the other thing that was happening to his body, we could see through the glass window pane as well. Have you ever left a package of meat out too long? And it starts to kind of swell up. If you see one like that at the grocery store, don't buy that particular package of meat. It's been left out. His face was swelling, his body was smelling, and finally they arrived from Cuba to begin a very short Catholic Mass. You can laugh there because there's no such thing as a short Catholic Mass. They go on and they go on and they go on. Not as much nowadays because everybody's got to be home at 1 o'clock for football. That's important, you know, so it's a little different nowadays. But it went on and it went on and on. The people in the front of the church were gagging by the smell, wishing things would come to a conclusion. So they're praying, they're singing, they're being quiet, and getting to the very end of the entire service when suddenly the dear bishop's body could contain itself behind that glass window pane no longer, and it busted out, breaking through the window glass, splattering his decaying flesh on the parishioners in the church. Pew. 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 Of course, people ran from the church, vomiting in the disgust. Of course they would. But now, don't worry about the dear Bishop Verreau. We scraped him back up, put him in a new box. He rests in pieces at the Talamoto Cemetery. And we're going to walk just a little ways this way. Just a little way. And that is the story of the exploding. You never just see it full on. It's always very quick in the periphery of your vision. He's shaking his head yes, like he knows all about shadow people. Yes, you've probably seen some himself. Shadow people are full, dark bodies. There's nothing glowing, nothing like that. It's just a full body image. They are frequently seen in the space behind me, this parking lot. And that's for good reason. So this was just an open field for many, many years. And then in the 50s, some of the nuns in the area went to the city and said, you know that it's about a 1/4 acre plot of dirt over there. We were wondering, how about we put in some tennis courts and a basketball court for the youth to enjoy that spot of dirt? Well, they agreed, but as they began to dig into the dirt to level it, they began discovering bodies, full bodies. And of course, everything stopped. They started an archaeological dig, discovered these were part of the Tamaqua. They were also buried with shells and other ornamental items, which meant this was a burial ground for the Tamaqua Indians, probably thousands of years of human remains beneath the asphalt. So obviously they did not put in tennis courts or basketball courts because that would be sacrilegious. Parking lot. Let's put in a parking lot instead. Nothing says honoring the deceased like a good parking lot. But if you think about it, if we want to keep tourists from digging up our dead people, let's cover them with a few inches of asphalt. That's what we did. So this is an area where we have a lot of shadow people activity. That's not right. That's yoga. That's yoga. That's a whole nother paranormal investigative thing. It is very active here in the parking lot. I will tell you, a lot of times we also see a black cat when we're here stopped at the tour, which is kind of fun. And we're headed this way. Paranormal activity. It could be black, activia, something different. But I am going to mix up anyway. I got a plan next week at breakfast. It's paranormal activity. It's going to be great. So anyway, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. So anyway, this anomaly that I want to talk to you about is something called a loop. A loop of paranormal activity means that it repeats itself continuously, usually because something bad happened and that spirit has not really released themselves from this piece of the earth. And so it's a loop of activity. It might be somebody walking, still trying to find out who killed them. It might be somebody walking to maybe avoid being struck by a garbage truck. I don't know, it could be anything. So this is an area of a loop. Behind us is also a phenomenon known at right about where you're standing in the middle of the street. It's that it doesn't matter what is in a space of earth now. It doesn't matter what building is here now. It matters what has happened over time in that space of the earth, in that part of the ether, if you would. And that is that is why sometimes you buy a brand new house and you have paranormal activity. And you say, why? It's a brand new house. And then you get a team of investigators out and they find out that something happened in that area of the dirt, maybe hundreds of years before. In North Georgia, there was a gentleman that called out a team that I used to work for out of Atlanta, and he had a shed door that each door kept flying open during the night. He closed the doors at night and the doors would be open. After some investigation, it was found out that his yard, where that shed was, his field, was actually part of the original Trail of Tears where the Indians had been forced out of North Georgia. And so they were probably still, and that would be a traumatic event that would be a loop of spirit realm. So anyway, right behind us here is an area of a loop phenomenon. And that is because it is the area where the very first murder occurred in St. Augustine, Florida. It stands on the books as the longest unsolved murder mystery, and it happened right here behind us in this piece of the dirt. So let me tell you a little bit about this street. At the end of this street, there was a woman, a young woman named Catalina. She had a home there at the end of the street, right roughly in this area. And Catalina, well, she was the kind of gal that would open her door in the evening to the soldiers and other gentlemen callers, and she would offer services for which she would be paid for her services rendered in the evenings of the gentlemen. I think she sewed buttons on. That's what I'm thinking. She sewed a lot of buttons on. That's what I'm going to go with. She was very good at sewing on buttons. On one evening, Lieutenant Guillaume Delaney was making his way to visit the young Catalina. Before he could get to her door, he was accosted in the street, beaten and stabbed and left for dead right in about that area. He crawled to her door, where she took him in, but unfortunately he died 3 days later. Now, in those days, the soldiers were super important here in town. And the governor was literally outraged at the fact that someone had murdered one of our soldiers. They were protecting us from Indian sieges, from pirates. They were important citizens in town. So he started an investigation, but no one was ever found guilty of murdering Lieutenant Guillaume. But we do know one thing. We know how he was killed, beaten and stabbed. We don't know who. I believe we know why. This is my motive, if you will. It is said that before he left the Castillo de San Marcos that night, he bragged to the other soldiers and showed them a ring and said, "Tonight, I ask Catalina for her hand in marriage." Maybe the other soldiers thought she wouldn't be sewing on as many buttons as a married woman as she had a single gal, if you know what I mean. And he lost his life for it. People still walk through here on hot, hot summer nights, suddenly get a chill. It's probably his spirit passing right through you as you walk up and down the street. Most of the time, people who wouldn't know the story just put it off to getting a chill. But I believe it might be Lieutenant Delaney. Now, this is another part of the tour where the producers encourage us to tell you a little bit about ourselves, because not everybody's grandma is out on a Saturday night telling scary stories to total strangers. But this grandma is, which makes me a really cool grandma, just have to say. Way up high on the cool grandma list, okay? I rank way up high there. That is because it all started, because I've been doing this since before the turn of the century is why. And by that I mean the year 2000. You knew where I was going. She knew. That just hit me this summer, and it was a little bit of a shock. I started doing this around 1995 in a little town north of Atlanta called Norcross. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of that little town. It's a cute little town, little railroad town. And our little town in October seemed a little dead. Pardon on there. People were not coming to Norcross to shop in the shops or eat at the restaurants, but they were going places like Stone Mountain, Georgia, Kennesaw, Georgia, Lawrenceville, Georgia, and Roswell, Georgia. They had ghost tours in October, so people were going to their towns. We said, well, we could do that. We have scary stories. People have been killed by trains, and moonshiners have been shot by sheriffs and all that stuff. So we started our own ghost tour. And at that point, I was in charge of documenting the history of the town, so I was writing the stories, and that was fun. We did it October after October. In those days, I was a debunker, if you would. I thought pish tosh to this whole spirit thing. But on one particular Friday night in August, we decided to have a little, a paranormal hunt, if you will, to stir up interest in our October impending tours. This night led me, it's embarrassing really to tell you, but it led me to suffer from a terrible phobia, frigatriskaidekaphobia. Do you have this as well? Yes. She does. Frigatriskaidekaphobia. I got it that night, and this is why you would have as well. So it was a Friday in August. It was the 13th. It was a Friday the 13th, full disclosure. Seemed like a good night to have a paranormal investigation. No, I won't do it again. I don't give tours on Friday the 13th anymore as a result of that particular evening. So we were going along. We had psychic mediums with us. We had a TV camera, a news crew with us. And we were going around town and people were getting some responses and things were going pretty good. And I still really wasn't a believer. And then we get to the last stop of the evening. The last stop was in front of a home that we knew a little boy named Billy had been killed while riding his bike in front of this particular home. Little Billy was 5 when he was killed in front of his home. Psychics had spoken to Billy before, and we knew that he resided in this home still. So we're on the front porch, and the psychics say, you know, let's finish the evening by trying to reach out to Billy. So we did. We called out, Billy, if you can hear us, send us a sign. Billy, if you can hear us, send us a message. At that very moment, 2 men in the crowd had their cell phones go off. Beep, beep, beep. Each of the men revealed 5 text messages on their phone. No name, unknown name, no number, no message, just 5. Beep, beep, beep. When they showed us their phones, 5 was interestingly enough, 5 was scary enough. But I get the goosebumps when I have to reveal to you, each of the men in the crowd that got those messages were both named William. Billy was sending us a message. And that is why I have frigatriskaidekaphobia, the fear of Friday the 13th. You won't find me out on a 13th, on a Friday. They know not to even call me. I stay home with a big bottle of Merlot. Lock the door. Works for me. Now, one of the gentlemen that evening was my son, Will, who said, Mom, this tour is over. And we went straight to the tavern, because all good ghost tours should end in a tavern. Just saying. We're going to head this way.
Rújame, ¿qué fue lo que dijo?
Soldiers were brought to, I just can't talk tonight. The soldiers were brought to recover from illnesses and injuries or to recuperate from surgical procedures. Now, the most frequent surgical procedure would be that of amputation. Now, during an amputation, no, you would not get whiskey or rum. Those are blood thinners. You don't want to go down that route when you've lost your hand. Not a great idea. And this area behind me was now listen closely. This area behind me was a graveyard, and that first church we talked about earlier was right there in the corner. We know that. We found sketches of where the church was. And I'll show you on the next stop why we know the graveyard was there. I have pictures. It's going to be great. So an amputation would start this way, usually in a response to a simple infection, because the Europeans were not really good about knowing if you get a little cut, perhaps you should scrub it with soap and water. They didn't really realize that. How about we just dump perfume and oil on top of it instead? That's a great thing. And by the way, if I would do a medical procedure on you, I would not wash my hands or anything and maybe start on you something. So not great medical practices in those days. They had a lot to learn. But an amputation would be a response to an infection. And perhaps it would start like this, with a very sharp curved knife. And the doctor would say, this hand has to go, it's infected, we need to get rid of it to save your life. And across the street in an open surgical suite, we would start the procedure. The sharp curved knife would go through the skin, go through the flesh. I hope you've passed out when he hits the nerve. And then they expose the bone. The surgical assistant would then pull the skin back, where the surgeon could get a very sharper the better, saw, and then would start cutting into your bones. A very excruciatingly brief 7 minutes. Then they would remove that part of your body, tuck the flap of skin up. They didn't stitch it. Careful, there's a horse coming. They would seal it off with a hot iron, similar to what we use to brand cattle. The smell must have been great. Ooh, that's right. Frying meat there, right off the grill, so to speak. Then the surgeon would take that part of the body that they have removed, and they would take it over and bury it here in the graveyard near the church. Which brings up a trivia question for which there is a prize. What is the difference between a graveyard and a cemetery? No. I gave it. Nope, I gave it away. Told you to listen.
They both have theirs.
Come on, I gave it away. Close, you're the closest one.
Is one consecrated and one not?
No. What was over there by the graveyard?
Oh, cemetery or graveyard is not church.
And a cemetery stands alone. You, my friend, have won a pack of mustard. Yay! You are ready for any sort of hot dog or soft pretzel that might pass by you tonight. So you are totally ready. I do have backup mayonnaise in case you're allergic. It's okay. Good job. So this was one of the very first graveyards. One of the most famous cemeteries here in town is the Huguenot Cemetery. It's over like in front of the parking garage. It's a really cool fenced in cemetery. Very, very cool. The Huguenot Cemetery was started in response to the yellow fever. When yellow fever came here in 1821, within the first 6 weeks, a third of the population was dead or dying. Careful, there's a car. Don't want anybody to get run over.
Is that why the people were so young in the, because of the yellow fever in the graveyard?
Well, a lot of them were young, yes. Yeah, a lot of them were
But it
young.
was from the yellow fever?
It's probably from the yellow fever.
Is that malaria? Is that the same thing?
No, that's different. Yellow fever is a little different. Yellow fever, your eyes turn yellow, your skin turns yellow, and you literally vomit up your insides for days until you slip into a coma. So there you go. So in 6 weeks, a third of the population is dead, which means of this group tonight, all of you guys are dead, and maybe you too. And for this, I need a victim. I mean a volunteer. I'm sorry. Gosh, I get those mixed up. I get those mixed up all the time. I meant a volunteer. Sorry. Don't start. Don't start with this. I'm a nice old man. It's going to be fun. So, she looks dead.
No, thank you.
Just saying. She's been vomiting up her insides for days. She's slipped into a deep coma. I don't think she's breathing. It's time to take her body to the cemetery and bury her next to her little cousin who we buried the day before. So I know it is sad, isn't it? So we get to the cemetery, and luckily her family can afford the $4 for a plot. That's good. And we start to put her in the ground. We're praying over her very soul when suddenly from that fresh buried ground next to hers, we hear a muffled sound of, "Help! I'm not dead yet, help!" We hear scratching and pounding on the box below the ground. Quickly, the men in the group start digging and digging and digging. They pull open that box, and the little girl, your dear little cousin, gasps for breath. She has survived the yellow fever. So now, yay! So now we start to wonder, how many other people did we bury too soon? So we came up with a solution. If you stick out your wee little finger, any finger will do. From then on, we would tie a string to your finger. Stay there, you're 6 foot down. And to the other end, we would attach a bell. If you have been buried before your time and awake from the coma, you would know about being in a panic, and that bell would start to ring. Then we could rush to your aid, dig you up, and you would have survived. You would then have become a dead ringer. Now, this works very well during the day when we can all hear the bell. What about midnight to 6 a.m.? Do you want to stay in the graveyard midnight to 6 a.m. listening for a bell? She would. But not everybody would like that. So we hired young boys about the age of 8 or 9 to sit in the cemetery listening for that bell. They would work from midnight to 6 a.m. the graveyard shift. The jokes don't get better, so don't care. All of this where we're standing is part of the graveyard that I was telling you about. I don't know why they put in that bright light. It was so much nicer out here in the store. But here we are anyway. So you'd all notice that beautiful new floor in the corner of A1A Ale Works. Of course you did. So during, a quick little addition to this story. If you watch Jeopardy on Christmas Eve, anybody? This story was the final Jeopardy answer. It was awesome. And I got it and my phone started ringing off the hook. And I was thinking about all the people I told this story to, whether anybody got it and said, we learned that from that little old lady in St. Augustine. It was great. This is the story, and it indeed was the final Jeopardy question on Christmas Eve on Jeopardy, which was super cool. So during October 2016, where you're standing, you would be knee-deep in a lovely mix of sewer and seawater. Ooh. And when I say sewer water, buddy, I mean sewer water. Like on the walls and everything. It was pretty gross. The smell was horrific. When the water receded, of course, the shops were ruined. The water was all the way up to Highway 1, past where we started the tour, past the winery. The Whetstone Chocolate Factory was flooded 1.5 feet. The Carmelo's was flooded. Everything was flooded. All of the bayfront shops were flooded. When the water receded, of course, many of the shopkeepers discovered they needed to rip out their walls and put up new walls, or rip out their flooring, in the case of A1A Ale Works, and put in new flooring. Now, here's the same as at home. If you need to start a project, you have to go to the city and get a permit. And we talked about our little special law, the antiquities law. It is part of that permitting. So if you start digging around and you find, say, a belt buckle, piece of a bowl or a dish, you have to stop and call the city. And they send out our archaeologist who checks out what you've got. And then he decides if you get to keep it or if it becomes the property of the city. Well, the shopkeeper here indeed had to cease and desist. He did not, why won't they get bigger? There it is. He did not find pottery. He did not find a belt buckle, but he had to stop just the same. When he ripped out the floor, this is what he found.
Something happened. Be careful.
Oh. It's trying to send it to the trash. Did you see that? Isn't that wild? No. Maybe, is that better?
Yeah.
Did it work?
Yeah.
My phone dropped at Christmas.
Oh, y ahora
A
sí se mira
3-year-old was
mejor.
involved.
No se miraba bien. No se miraba bien, parecía un pescado. Parecía un pescado.
¿Cómo hacer un pescado?
So they stopped what they were doing and they called the city.
Pero también amarillo.
Pero si fuera money, no llaman a la ciudad.
That's where the new wood is, or here?
Yeah. Underneath the floor. I like this one. Hang on. I like this one because he's smiling. This was number 2 of the bodies that they found. They found 4 full bodies buried beneath the floor of the shop. Now, this was big news here in our town, of course. Yes. So if you're curious later, Google skeletons of St. Augustine. The media was here. Jessica Clark, our little local, who's my Jacksonville people. Y'all know Jessica Clark, our local people. She lives around the corner. So that's why she does all the St. Augustine stories. She came out with her cameras. The local archaeologist jumped in that hole with those bodies looking up at him. Well, skeletal remains at that point. He jumped in. He took a lot of pictures. He took a lot of measuring. That measuring tape comes in handy, like I told you. He did carbon dating and proved that these 4 skeletal remains were from the late 1500s of Spanish descent. So they were from the first colonists. And that was the final Jeopardy question. In Hurricane Matthew of 2016, unearthed skeletal remains that dated back to the 1500s in what ancient city? And the answer was St. Augustine. Cool, cool, very cool. So he took a lot of pictures. It made the national news that night, as a matter of fact. And then the archaeologist told the shopkeeper, let's cover them up and feel free to put in your new floor. And that's what they did. So they are beneath the laminate flooring because, like I said, everywhere you walk, you're walking on the deceased here in town. Even where we're here now. Because if you'll notice, the street is brick and then it becomes asphalt. I wonder why. Well, that's because one hurricane in 2 years is not fun enough. We had to have 2. And when Irma hit, this street flooded again. They came out with heavy equipment to fix the pipes and the plumbing under the street. They discovered 5 more skeletal remains right about where you're standing. Under the street. All of these are right there. Again, they identified them. They took the pictures, all of this, then they covered them up and put in the new street. So there are no doubt bodies beneath us here and there, pretty much everywhere.
They covered over the 5 bodies they found?
The street is covered over the bodies because where else are we going to put them? They've been there over 400 years. So we are going to walk this way now, and now you know the story of the skeletons of St. Augustine. We're going to walk this way. It's your job to remind me to show a picture at the end of the story. You have a job. Come on in, come on. I need my picture. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Come on in, guys. This will be our last stop of the evening. It's been my pleasure to be with you this new 2020 year. I will stay and linger a while after the tour. If you're feeling gratuitous, that would be appreciated. I'm also available to answer questions like, how do I get to my car? Or where can I get an adult libation? I can find both of those for you. So, there we go. And we do have a picture. Don't leave before we show a picture at the end. It is actually pointed towards the governor's mansion. So that's a good direction to point your cameras during this particular story. So here we are on the Plaza de la Constitución. It is the center of St. Augustine, literally. And behind me, the obelisk, that's the shape of that statue, also the shape of the monument. See, this is going to come up on Jeff Embers. The obelisk is the center of the plaza. The governor would oversee the activity on the plaza from his balcony behind him. Now, the plaza is the place where there would be lots of fun activities. We would have a market, we would have music, and sometimes after church on Sundays, we'd have an execution. We'd have a hanging. Yay! No hangings. We did not hang you back in those days. It was a form of strangulation, a Spanish form of strangulation called garrote. When you were garroted, it was a torturously painful and slow method of strangulation, and I need a victim. Volunteer. Gosh, I get this messed up. So come on. No, God can't help you now. So, you were accused by the governor of being dastardly doer of dastardly do's, the governor would say, you are going to meet your death after church on Sunday, bring a picnic, because we didn't have a lot of entertainment back then, no Netflix. So you would be brought here to the plaza in the area where the obelisk is behind us. And behind you would be driven into the ground a large palm log. And right about neck height, they would drill a hole in the log. Through the hole would go a rope. Over Christmas, my nephew was visiting, and I did this. We have a picture of me doing this to my nephew. It's great. Aunt Sally strangles me in the plaza. Put the rope around your neck, and behind here we would begin. You put another little stick, and we would start twisting. We're twisting and twisting. With the first twist, your eyes bug out. Very good. He got it on the first try. Wow, very good. Are you available tomorrow night at 7:45? With the second twist, heavy breathing. He's very good at this. No, your arms are by your side because you're a gentleman, sir. With the third and fourth twist, blood is oozing from his ears, his eyes, his nose, and his mouth. Don't do this. She would be mad at me. Don't do that, and my tip is gone. With the fourth twist and the fifth twist, your head is dangling virtually by a thread. The executioner takes a sharp saber and finishes the job. Don't go anywhere. Your head rolls to the ground, but your body shakes around for a while. Very good, because it doesn't know it can't yet. I would say connection, but let's call it deconnect. To go. Then we take your head, drive it on that palm log, march it to the bay front, drive it into the ground to tell other people, this is what we do to dastardly pirates. The message was pretty clear. Thank you so much. I appreciate you so much. So the most famous of all executions here in St. Augustine was that of a young man named Andrew Ransom. Now, Andrew Ransom was only 15 years old when the governor said he was a pirate. He should be killed Sunday after church during a picnic. So they brought him here to the spot on the plaza. They put the palm log in behind him. They put the rope around his neck, and they began to twist. With the first twist, eyes bug out. Second twist, heavy breathing. With the third twist, the blood is oozing from his eyes, his ears, his nose, and his mouth. But at that moment in time, he is able to reach into his pocket and pull out a rosary. Now, we've talked in depth about the importance of Catholicism here. He began a fervent prayer for his life with that rosary. The priests in attendance were amazed and called out to the governor, said he's Catholic. You can't kill a Catholic. We were killing Protestants, not Catholics. You can't kill a Catholic. The governor said to continue. At this moment, the priests got down on their knees and joined him in the prayer for his very life. With the next twist of the rope, his head should have come loose, but in a twist of fate, if you will, the rope broke. The priests were amazed. They thought God had saved Andrew Ransom's life. A miracle. They call out again to the governor, who says, get another rope. With this, the executioner calls out to the governor, says, sir, I cannot execute a fellow Catholic here on the plaza. They see the governor reaching for a rope to the wall, no doubt to finish the job himself. With this moment in time, the priests have an opportunity to take Andrew Ransom into their robes and whisk him off to the church, where they keep him sequestered from the governor because the law of God was stronger than the law of the governor. During this time in our history, they are building the Castillo de San Marco. The governor is 22 years into building it. Spain is telling him, hurry it up already. We're tired of sending you money to get this job done. Giant sand castle they didn't think would last. That was 400 years ago. I think it held up pretty good. He notices at this very same point, Andrew Ransom is becoming a stonemason for the church and helping to build a new church. So he propositions the young man, says, if you leave your job here at the church and help me finish the Castillo de San Marco, When it is complete, I will grant you a pardon, and you will be a citizen of St. Augustine in good standing. So he agrees. 2 more years, the Castillo is complete, and surprisingly, the governor keeps his promise. Andrew Ransom is a free man. And in another twist of fate, if you will, Andrew Ransom married the governor's daughter.
All funny.
Imagine the holiday, dear Dad. It is said she is the one who gave him the rosary, taught him the prayer, because he was a dastardly English Protestant. And that was the twist of fate that saved Andrew Ransom's life. Now, why would I finish the night of a ghost story with somebody who survived? The last bit of paranormal information I will give you tonight is that we know we are looking for energy, residual energy. We are energy. What does science tell us about energy? Is it depleted? Never. It finds a new form. That's science. We believe Andrew Ransom's energy lingers here on the plaza as he sent out so much energy that day. It has been my pleasure to be with you. I do have a picture to show you. I'm thankful for you to come out on this New Year night of January. Thanks again for coming and being with me. Thank you. You're very kind. Thank you so much. I have a picture. So on June 22nd, a guest took this photograph. Like I said, I've been doing this a long time. Never in all my days have I seen a picture that was this compelling of what I believe is paranormal activity. I tell you, you just can't get away from it.
Y que año era?
If you find it,
¿Ah? ¿Y de qué año?
this was the night we had a full moon, a black cat, and a rat. It was active. So if you look at the picture, look on the balcony, and you'll see what I believe looks like a glowing young lady with her arms on the rail. You see the green glow? This picture is also posted on our Facebook page. It's a pretty fascinating.
So we just ended our ghost tour in St. Augustine, Florida. It was a nice tour. In group one, if you're coming with a group of friends, you can get it for $30. $30. If you buy online, it's $20 per person. And if you come personal and buy it in store, it's $22. So best choice is Groupon. Had a nice night with our friends and my love. Now we're gonna go eat. Have a good night. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to my channel. Subscribe to my channel.